So you're all very, very welcome to here today to Tramore Road campus for our IBCP seminar on pollinators sustaining nature. We've been very, very lucky the last few days to have such wonderful weather, and it's given us the reason for why we're here. You know that we're beginning to see all the pollinators coming out and about, or the lack thereof. And so we're all interested in this area. We're all drawn here together, and I hope that you enjoy the day and that it becomes the start of something else, not just coming to hear speakers today. So just to give you an outline of what we're going to do, I did a little bit of an introduction about the IBCP, and then my colleague Dan Crowley will talk, and we follow on with that with Rosemarie McDonald from Cork City Council, and another colleague of mine, Alice Jaeger, will talk before we have a break. And then Signe is also going to speak for us, Signe Martin, and then Mike Walsh. And after that, then we'll have some closing remarks and a Q&A session. So just to begin, I'll give you a small introduction to the IBCP, who we are and what we do. So we are a volunteer-led charity. We're focusing on protecting Ireland's native wild bees and promoting biodiversity. So what we do is our work centres around 4 key pillars. The first one is education. The second is conservation, community engagement, and organisational development. We run workshops, we install habitats, and we support scientific research to ensure long-term environmental health through pollinator protection. So what's our seminar about today? So our seminar is to highlight the vital roles that bees and other pollinators play in food security, healthy ecosystems, and climate resilience. It brings together community groups, environmental advocates like yourselves, and experts to share knowledge, foster collaboration, and inspire action, especially in urban areas like Cork, where pollinator habitats are under pressure. Our core aim is to create pollinator-friendly habitats and educate the public about their importance. By improving awareness and access to nature-based solutions, we hope to influence both local and national approaches to biodiversity and sustainability. We need your help. So to continue our work, we need your help. So as a grassroots organisation, you rely on volunteers like yourselves, community partnerships, and financial support. You're seeking a physical base in Cork City, funding for full-time staff, and collaboration with schools, local authorities, and environmental bodies to expand our reach and impact. Together, we can protect Ireland's pollinators for future generations. So I'm just going to introduce the first speaker there, and it is my colleague, Dan Crowley. Are you Dan? So Dan is a course director here at Tramore Road campus for Horticulture 1 and 2, Year 1 and 2, and Greenkeeping. He's also heading our Green Campus Committee, and we're delighted to let you know that Tramore Road campus recently gained Green Flag status with Antashka. Today, Dan is going to talk about actions taken on campus to promote diversity.
Morning, everyone. How are you all doing? Thanks to Pat and to Rachel and all the committee for inviting me and for organising today. It's lovely to see such a good range of speakers, and I'm going to say a bit about this morning about what we've done on campus here and what our kind of actions are. And I'm looking forward to sitting down and to listening to and gleaning some more knowledge from the other speakers. So just to say what I'm going to speak about is really what we've been doing on campus to promote biodiversity in general, and I suppose specifically for pollinators. And we've kind of used the Green Campus model, if you like, to help us with that. So we signed up to Green Campus in 2019, and the 2 themes we took on were biodiversity and litter and waste. And so we've been, I suppose, using that model to get the students and staff involved in different projects over the last few years. I'm going to show you just some examples of what we've been doing. And while you're here today, if you get a chance to wander around as well, and we have a path around the campus which I'll show you, and you're welcome to enjoy that if you get a chance today. So, like I said, we try and get the students and staff involved, and this is orientation week last year, and we're showing the students here. In the background is the wildflower meadow and some native trees we planted the year before that. So, and that's some of the finished work. We also litter and waste, which is a more boring theme that we're dealing with, of course. But we do also at times do little pickups out with the students and staff on campus as well. And it's nice to get people together, even though it's not the nicest job in the world. It is still nice to get the community spirit going. So I'm going to fly past litter and waste and into biodiversity. So this is one of the first years we started with, well, I would say first. The college has been here, I think, since, I think the building's around the 1970s maybe. It's been a further education college since the mid-80s. Horticulture was one of the first courses here, I think around in 85 or thereabouts. So really kind of since then, I think the campus has been developing in terms of planting and that. And Bernard Brennan, who was the course director of horticulture for many years, and his colleagues would have planted a lot of the trees that are now maturing on site. So this is 2018. We're just kind of, I suppose, adding the whole time to the planting you have. This is an area, quite a steep sloping bank to the south of the college, and just on Tramore Road there. And I suppose it was, a bit of space we wanted to try and plant up. So we planted up with native trees and shrubs. There's about 30 different species in there. Some of them we actually had grown ourselves and propagated and grown in our own nursery, more than we bought in from Kale Kill from Future Forest. So that was what it looked like year one. That was 2018. We, again, students working on mulching around those plants, and a really heavy mulch year one and quite dense planting as well. There we go, and we're down to this way. It should be, here we go. This was not many years there. I don't have a date on that. That's probably 2022 actually, what that is. So that's about 4 years after planting. Okay, so you have on the right hand side, you have the trees and shrubs have matured, and now they're kind of creating a screen, from the roadway and that. And then you have the meadow in front of it. From the other side, so it's hard to kind of imagine how quickly you can get an area like that to develop. So once you use, the right planting and you plant dense enough, you can do it pretty fast. So it's good. And it's nice to see. And like I said, with such a variety of different shrubs and trees in there, there's always going to be something in flower and fruit, so it's quite good in that regard. Then out on the east side of the campus, we have some playing pitches, and we really wanted to try and put a perimeter walkway around the college because it's quite a big space, and we found a lot of students didn't realize, they could wander around, So you had sports students that might know the pitches are there, and horticulture students might know that the woodland was here, but wasn't connecting. So this path was put in June 22, just as a perimeter lap around the college. And then when we put that in, of course, then we saw an opportunity for putting in a wildflower meadow and some trees alongside it. So Pat was put in, looks pretty boring. And then we said, okay, well, let's start with our wildflower. So we ordered a wildflower seed, native wildflower seed. And most of it we prepared to ground and sowed it by hand. But we also, just for the crack, with our horticulture students, planted some of the seedlings in plugs originally, just to see what we'd get and to use that as a plant identification project as well. And so we had these plugs, which you wouldn't normally, kind of bother raising wildflowers in plugs just from a time point of view, but we did it just in some cases to be able to see the difference in plants as well. And then when we went out to plant, again, very much student-led, prepared the ground, and as I said, sowed the seed or planted in plugs or both. So there's the path, and on the left of the path, that kind of quite steep slope, south-facing bank where we put in the meadow. On that bank, then, as well as putting the meadow, we didn't want to just have all meadow, we wanted to put in trees as well. So we put in, again, another mix of native trees and shrubs, and you can see a few of them there just started being put in. That's probably March 23, I think is what that is. And then we had for planting slugs and seeds, let's put a shout out to all the students in the college to come out. And one of the courses that were really good to come out was the music course. And they brought some musicians as well, so we had a bit of a sing song. And it was actually a lovely way to see different groups come together. And so here we are, so with the slugs and seeds. And this is 1 year on. This is March 24. I guess it was 24, yeah. It must have been, yeah. March 24. And planting more trees. And so these are the trees that I said we'd raised them ourselves in our own. We have a tree and shrub nursery on site as part of the horticulture course. So we raised them ourselves, and then we, lift them as bare root trees and move them over to plant them in situ. So When we also that then we had any kind of trees that are taken on site that we happen to have dead wood, we just keep those logs and put them into the site just to create another habitat, but also even visually to let people know like it has some maturity to it. So those logs that are left over, they're always kept on site. And then, you know, in the summer, then of course you've got some nice flowering. Because always, while flowers are tricky, you know, people often go them for to look good. Some people, I don't know, are going maybe more for pollinators. And everyone has a different idea as to what it looked like. And, you know, it never looks the same for 2 days, yeah. And it only really looks well for maybe, as in, well, what is well. It looks well in some people's mind for a couple of days in the year, maybe, you know. So, I always get a few photographs when it does get into full flower. So you look at them here, and so you know, in the summertime it'll look like that for a little while, especially early on when you get lots of annuals coming through. But it doesn't always like that. So it's about, I suppose, making that connection too, and that people understand that, you know, it's not all about how it looks, more about maybe the value of it. But that's what we have now. And I'll shoot down through here a couple of other ones, and this is kind of late summer into August time, and you see the variety of it there. This is only earlier this week, so you're starting to see now where that area of trees and shrubs is creating a screen, and quite nice backdrop, and so later in the summer now we'll see a bit more color in there as well. This is also earlier this week, so this time of the year we've cut back the meadow during the winter and taken off the clippings. So to get dandelion this time of year, obviously, and you have some, I think, probably buttercup as well, and some red campion there coming through as well. This is apple, crabapple, which we brought a lot of apple on site, crabapple on site as well. So fabulous amount of flowers at the moment because it's been so settled recently. So there's crabapple in crazy flowers at the moment. And then of course we got involved with Pat, and through a mutual acquaintance of ours, and Pat offered to come in and put up some bee boxes on site. And it was a lovely way again of getting people to understand and to be able to wander around the college and see what was there. So these are the bee boxes that this is Johnny here and Pat helped us put in. And again, as part of that, then Pat offered to come in and speak to the students and staff. And so we had a a seminar out in the woods here. This is on site. We're putting up the boxes as well. So this part of the path is in the woodland, which is on the west side of the college here. And I suppose that was a very simple fact to make because we have a chipper on site, and again, any branches are cut, they're always chipped. So that's our own bat mulch. We just use the timber we had to create the edges of the path. And really, once the path went in place, then people started to use and started to wander around, much more easily. And then to have things along the way, like a bench or like these bee boxes, was a great way of, making the journey a bit more interesting for people. And again, we have the pollinator stand here. You've seen this on the way in at the front door here. The man himself. And just an example of what the woodland, the plat was like when we were just trying to figure out a way to go through it and to go around what was there. And there we go. So it's a bench that one of our students really wanted to donate, a bench to the college. She spent a couple of years here as a student and really enjoyed her time here, and she really wanted to leave something after her. So this is a bench that she commissioned, and just with a nice inscription as well. So you might find that today as you wander around. It's a nice place to hang out. And it does help people. So I suppose the connection there between like doing something for pollinators, doing something for the environment, doing something for biodiversity, but also make it like for people as well, So it can be both, and it's not just for one thing, So it's nice to have the people enjoy the space as well. And then while they're enjoying the space, if they can learn something even better. So we're a partner of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, and we got these signs from them last year and put them up around the campus as well, so people could have a bit of learning as they go along. A couple of odd things then we do here. So as part of the horticulture course, we've a plant sale every year where the students propagate plants and have a sale in May. And I suppose we've seen a bit of a change recently in the last few years from people looking to buy annuals. more looking now to buy perennials. So we would try to, as much as possible now, go a wide range of perennials that are all kind of pollinator friendly plants. So just a small change you might see, might notice yourself even in gardening. Even a lot of the planting around locally as well has changed from kind of 15 years ago, where it was a lot of annual plants. Now it's more likely to be perennial planting. Another one of the lot of things here, we have a kitchen garden on site where we go, the students grow some vegetables there. And this is a cover crop or a green manure called Cecilia, you might know of. And that's just taken this week where we've that cover crop on for the winter. And it was very close to getting into flower actually, because it was sown last September, October time. So I think this is an example of it from a couple of years ago in the same area. This is probably July or August. So in a few weeks' time, we're going to turn that hopefully into that. And it's one plant that is very, it attracts a lot of insects. So that'll be interesting to see in a few weeks' time. And one or two more other things before I finish up. One of our students was involved in doing a fighting course through FOTA. You might know about that with Ian down there. And Suzanne here came in and gave a workshop to some students and staff about 3 weeks ago, maybe. It was really interesting because we got a lot of students come out from different courses, and it was just maybe kind of 2-hour workshop. You can do a full day course in it if you want to. So when they were there, then some of the students and that they practiced using the side on the wildflower meadow. So we got a double bang for that. It was great. So it was a nice, interesting way of managing a meadow. And there's just a side there on the ground. So I suppose one of the things we're kind of proud of is that as part of the process, we got a border green flag only recently there. I think it was maybe in February when we had the presentation, and that was lovely kind of to mark it. But I suppose the more enjoyable part is the doing, and kind of the process of it. So I'm going to leave you with this slide here, which is this is actually the day that we first kind of opened the path and got people to kind of come out and walk around. And so that's one of my favorite images because it involves people using the space. And so that's just a brief kind of overview of what we've done here and some of the things we've been involved in. So happy to answer any questions if you have any. And other than that, thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
So thanks very much, Dan. I enjoyed looking at all those photos and bringing back great memories. It's fascinating to think that I've been teaching here 24 years. I know I don't look old enough to be in here for that long time, but I have been, and it wasn't until that path opened that I ever actually walked the campus. And it's something I do regularly, and I often smile. The bathroom is just beyond here, and the walkway goes along that path, and it's just lovely to see students and colleagues going out. It's kind of linked into our well-being in the college as well, good for your mental health to take 15 minutes to take a walk around. So I would highly recommend it, and it literally does take 15 minutes. I do like to see some of the pictures there, just to see them out in reality out in our grounds. So hopefully you get to see doing a bit of a walk later on today. So our next speaker is Rosemarie McDonald. Rosemary is Biodiversity Officer for Cork City Council. She's a Dublin girl living in Cork, but we're not going to hold that against her. And she has worked in Dublin Zoo and 2 national parks, and she has worked in consultancy. And she's here today to speak about biodiversity in park in Cork City Council. So if you'd like to welcome Rosemary McDonald. So I'm one of the biodiversity officers in Cork City Council. My colleague Ushna Keating unfortunately couldn't make it today, so you just get myself for today. So I'm based in the Parks Department, so I'm based in the Operations Directorate in Cork City Council. So just think of how big Cork City is now since the boundary extension since 2019. I've been in my post for about just over 2 years now in the Parks Department. I'm just going to go through kind of what I do as a biodiversity officer, what we're doing in park, what we're doing in Cork City Council, and how we have changed over the last few years, and hopefully in the next few years even change more. So I've worked in 2 national parks. I've worked in Wicklow and I've worked in Now as an educational guide. Obsessed with wildlife from a young age. I'm a registered, I have a license to ring birds, so catch them and put little rings on them. So that's one of my favourite birds I got to ring. It was a light-bellied Brent goose in Dublin Bay. And that bird is, she was female and she got 2 red rings on her called TV. And I'm mad into hiking as well. So I'm very blessed between Kerry and Washford and Tipperary. So I'm spoiled here in Cork. My role is very varied. I couldn't tell you what I do on a daily, weekly basis. These are just kind of the broad kind of strokes what I do. In Cork City Council, we have 38 parks ranging from an acre up to 150 acres. We also have all the open spaces. Not all are managed by Cork City Council, but a lot of them are. And then also we have a number of cemeteries in the new transition areas and also in the old section as well. So it's a really big remit in terms of managing wildlife within them. I work with a lot of community groups, and there's a lot of communities here that I would know as well from working with them as well. I go into a lot of schools, primary and secondary schools, so we're tied in with the Environmental Awareness Officer. Myself and Usna would visit primary schools, secondary schools to give talks about biodiversity in Cork City, to the schools that are on the biodiversity flag or the food and biodiversity flag. I also then work across the different sections within Cork City Council. So at the moment, there's new Marina Park Phase 1 that's being built by our infrastructure section. So I got a sneak peek of it at the moment. I got there on Friday. So just seeing how it's been developed for wildlife. And then also it's going to be taken in charge by parks in due course. So we'll be putting plans in place for having lovely wildflower meadows, but also spaces for people to enjoy as well. We're also working with infrastructure. There's going to be a new Northwest Park that'll be up kind of the Knockmaheny area. So that's in a master plan area at the moment, master plan stage at the moment. So they're kind of going through public consultation. So kind of getting in on the ground first and what we want for biodiversity. So it would be like nature-based solutions, creating wildflower meadows, different ways of potentially managing wildflower meadows, not using machines, potentially using livestock, that kind of stuff. I'm just going to go through some of the stuff that I've been involved with for the last 2-3 years. I've actually been in the Parks Department about 4 years, and before I was biodiversity officer, I was kind of helping in the background. So I'd be helping with the head of parks, our horticulturist, just picking flowers and stuff like that. So like these are just highlights of what the Parks Department does. I'm only slightly involved in them. So since 2020, there's been real change from us going from annual bedding from your summer to your winter to permanent bedding and permanent perennials that are pollinator friendly. And since 2020, we've been increasing the amount of pollinator friendly planting we do. We're involved in the Green Flag Parks Awards, so it's an international award. We've been involved since 2021, and we now have 5 green flag parks in Cork City. One in Ballincollig, one in Douglas, Fitzgerald's Park in the city centre, Shalom Park in the city centre, and then on the north side, Jerry O'Sullivan Park. We've been increasing since 2020 the amount of wildflower meadows that we have in Cork City. A lot of them are within our park, but also there's some in residence in kind of open spaces around Cork City as well. I've also been involved in helping with the Signe Martin wall, so in terms of design and making sure it's kind of working in terms of making sure the habitat is right for the Signe Martins, putting out the collar system to try and attract them in. There's a lovely 16-bedroom apartment there for them. They haven't moved in yet, but they do feed on the loch. So if you're going for a nice walk around the loch, have a look out for your Signe Martin. I'll have a picture of them in a minute. I work a lot with Marie Young and Green Spaces for Health. So we helped fund the ponds that went into Toker Community Garden in the Cashtock Park. And also at the moment, we've been involved for the last year. So we're part of a European Interreg project called Green Den. So it's about greening the grey infrastructure that we have. So greening the urban realm and public realm. So we picked 2 pilot sites, and I'll speak about them later on. So we just had all our EU partners over last week, and we're entertaining them for the last few days in Cork. And sure, the weather came out, it was great. I thought it was glorious. So these are just some of the images that we have around Cork City. So the central aisle around the South Link, we have left it kind of grow wild for dandelions this time of year, so they will be cut at the end of April into May. But the sea is yellow at the moment, and you can see as along. It's thanks to the NTA have adopted the Ireland Pollinator Plan as well. So they're like, you can see the dandelions where years before you couldn't spot them. We do a lot of wildflower meadows in the regional park. Our head foreman, Jack Casey, really good horticulturist. He does sow his own wildflower seeds. He ships them in for the UK. And this is in the Inishcar car park, just where the picnic tables are at the bridge. And it's a photographer's dream, and it's usually absolutely buzzing for wildlife as well. We have about 100 tier planters in Cork City that go from winter to the summer bedding. We're up to about 85% of all the bedding that goes into it are pollinator friendly. In the winter time, they're not pollinator friendly, but we'll put in some spring bulbs like your great hyacinth to attract in the bumblebees. And you can see a little bumblebee there in the top right. That's just off Patrick Street, so great to see. And we have changed a number of the bedding outside in the City Hall and around Cork City to pollinator friendly annual perennials, and these are just kind of in full bloom. And the well roundabouts in Douglas, we actually got a thank you card from a resident saying thanks for doing this. It's a real pop of colour, really unusual to do. We're part of the Green Flags Awards. So the Green Flag Award were judged on 8 teams. I'd be kind of more involved with the biodiversity end of it, but I'd also be making sure our management, we need to do a management plan on an annual basis. They're 5-year plans, and they need to be updated annually. So that these are all the teams. So, we need to make sure our parks feel safe for people. They have good signage. It's people know about our park, but also we need to look at, are we spraying? And we're not spraying. We've stopped using glycophosphates since January 2022 in the Parks Department and in Cork City. And we have moved towards organic herbicides. And then also our park staff, we're kind of moving towards manual removal. So we'd along a path, we'd have a little wire brush attachment onto a strimmer rather than spraying them on a 6-week basis, that kind of thing. Pollinator stuff, we actually have some of your solitary bees posts in our parks as well. They're working out quite well. So this is just Fitzgerald's Park. There's some hopefully nice images. It's a really green spot in the urban setting and along the corridor of our lovely River Lee. And this is the museum. The museum's actually being updated at the moment, and hopefully we're going to get in some Swift boxes in on the museum as well. And this is the lovely pond as well. So these are just some of the biodiversity elements within it. I have to say the solitary bee posts were in about a month, and I was just checking them to see anything going on. And we actually saw a leaf cutter fly in with a little bit of leaf on it, which was just amazing. And it's right beside the bandstands. This is Shalom Park. It's a very small 1-acre park at the city centre there, just near the Elysium. And this green spot down on the bottom left was just grass. So in 2021, the grass was lifted and planted up with pollinators, and it's absolutely bubbling. Then there's a little bit of a community garden within the park itself. It's kind of community led, and it's absolutely buzzing with stuff as well. But it's a lovely spot to come and have your lunch as well. The regional park, I have to say, is probably the jewel in the crown. It's probably our favourite park, to be honest. I'm very glad to work and then live with College as well. It's 150 acres along the River Lee, just wet woodlands, grasslands, and just amazing walks to go for, and for everyone as well. Our wildflower meadows are just stunning. So we have about 14 acres that are kind of left to go wild. So this is up in the rugby field, lovely wet grassland.
is another little section kind of hidden away, another wet woodland. Then this is known as the oak field. And this is the wildflower meadow kind of up near where the playground is and the playing pitches as well. Wide variety of stuff. It's just managed, left, cut once a year, and that's it. Beautiful orchid, buttercup, yeah. They used to. So we did up until 2020. And then unfortunately, the bales were set on fire. So we don't now. We kind of cut them both. Unfortunately, yeah. This year we're changing it. I'll show you what we're doing this year. So these are just some of the wildflowers that you'll see in the regional park. Douglas is about 5-6 acres in Douglas. It's a kind of thoroughfare within Douglas Village. It's very community-led. You know, tidy towns are involved. The community association is involved. It's a lovely park for people to enjoy. There's a coffee dock there. There's a playground there. But there's wild stuff as well. There's a wildflower meadow planted by primary school kids, which is lovely to see. And this is Jerry O'Sullivan. Didn't choose to do Jerry O'Sullivan. Kind of had other parks in mind, but I have to say the park staff pulled it out of the bag. We did a lot more pollinator planting. And we put in the bee post as well. We have a lovely parklet that's planted up as well. And this was the last part that we got the green flag for. We've been part of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan since September 2019, so before I joined. So on an annual basis, we have to report what we do. So we have to have at least 5 actions that we've done in Cork City Council that's sent to the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, and it's published on an annual basis. These are some of the actions that we've been doing over the years. You'll see these signs around the place as well. These are some of the summer bedding that goes in and some of the permanent bedding as well. And these are some of the herbaceous perennials that have gone in the last few years. These are some of the locations. We're up to about 80 acres, around 80 acres of wildflower meadows in Cork City at the moment. And these are just kind of a visual image of what we have. And from this year, we're looking at hiring new equipment. So this is your Amazon 1500 flail mower. So it cuts and collects it for us. And then we're going to have to remove that green waste and send it off to a green waste facility. And then also potentially going into community gardens as well. And then also we're going to be mapping all our wildflower meadows and then seeing what habitats we actually have, what types of grasslands we have, and then also then monitoring them on a yearly basis. So we have, this is Cork City. This is the whole administrative area. And the green dots that you're seeing there is actually privately owned gardens. So you can see those natural corridors. So we're kind of playing around with stats at the moment. So there's about 75,000 private gardens in Cork City. That equates to around 2,300 hectares. And then the public open spaces that we have is around the same, with just 2,950, around that. So in terms of percentages, we have about 12% of Cork City is under open spaces, and then 12% is in private as well. So we can do loads in our public open space, sort of, as all of us here probably are doing, in our own little private spaces. We're, providing spaces for pollinators. There's some really good examples in Cork City in terms of kind of grassroots examples of kind of promoting pollinators. This is a little project along Blarney Street. They came together, they were just looking for some funding to fund the leaflet and fold a little sticker. So they went door to door, just chatting to neighbours along Blarney Street. There's about 200-300 south-facing gardens there. It's a very grey area as well. But just to do 3 simple things: leave space, cut less, and spray less as well. And these are just some of the community groups that we work with in Cork City Council. I hope this works, but apparently it can take up to 5 years to attract in sand martins into their little home. So if you go for a walk around the loch, go up to the north end of it, have a scan over to the island. It's a lovely new hotel there for them. A caller system goes out this time of year, and it's the call of the sand martin. So they're kind of attracted in, kind of going, will I nest here or not? They haven't yet, but hopefully in a few years they will. And they do feed on the loch. And this is the pond that was built in Clashtown Park in the Toker Community Garden, built by humans in a day. Amazing to watch. And it's just a beautiful sensory place. You know, you can see your dragonflies, you can see your ducks, your mallards, and everything else in between. And within about 6 weeks, there was life in that pond. So yeah, it was absolutely amazing and amazing to see as well. So this is the European project I'm involved with. It's called Green Dense. Our tagline is empowering urban nature. So it's about putting in rain gardens, putting in planters with pollinator-friendly plants, and greening the grey structure that we have in North in Cork. And our 2 pilot sites are along North Main Street and up Dean Street, Ford Street. So we're kind of in public consultation at the moment. And then next we'll be doing kind of drawings of what we can put in, costings of what we want to put in as well. And then going to senior management and seeing if we can get the funding for it. And thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Roki, for that. It was a really interesting presentation. I suppose seminars like this are very important because sometimes, you know, as an individual, you might feel a little bit isolated. Then you come into a group like IBCP and you meet like-minded people, and then it's going broader here now today to get an understanding of what's going on all around us at the moment. And it's very exciting. Actually, I really enjoyed your presentation, so thank you very much. Now, so we have one more speaker before lunch, and that speaker is one of our new volunteers with the IBCP Outreach and Education team. It's Dr. Alice Jaeger. She's a food scientist and she's a PhD in upcycling brewery byproducts for improved nutrition. Well, I'd be fascinated to see that. Alice has an interest in sustainable food systems, and today she's going to give a talk on the impact of pollinators on the global food system. So we've done local to Cork and we're going global now in the next presentation. So just welcome Dr. Alice Jaeger, please.
So yeah, like Rachel said, I'm a new volunteer with the IBCP. I've only been with them a few months, but I'm having a great time so far. But my background is in food science. So I recently finished my PhD in UCC, and a lot of my work was focused on sustainability and looking at sustainable food systems. So that ties in a little bit with what I'm going to talk about today, which is basically I'm going to just give a kind of a overview on pollinators and our food system at the moment and how, in fact, nature feeds us. So I know we're probably all aware of pollination, how pollination works, but just to really start at the beginning, just to see what, just make sure we're all on the same page. Pollination refers to the transfer of pollen from one plant to another, which is needed for reproduction. And when we look at pollination in terms of food, we're often looking at 2 different types. We're looking at either insect or wind pollination. Insect pollination, as you know, insects carries pollen from one plant to the other. Wind, that pollen is carried on the wind. And what's interesting is over 75% of our global food crop species are reliant on insect pollination instead of wind. So just to go into a little bit more detail on that, on the left, that's the statistic that I just said, the 75% of the global food species. So that's types of food species that we're growing. And on the right-hand side here, we have total global food volume. So about a third of the total global food volume is reliant on these animal pollinator-dependent species. So we have a bit of a discrepancy here. Like we see 75%, that looks like it should be more of the food volume. But what that is actually a lot of the food that we use as staple crops, say the likes of wheat, corn, rice, they're all more reliant on wind, more so than insects. So when we're looking at this, it's very much it's a big focus on the variety of food we have, is what insect pollination is responsible for, you know, the wide variety that we have available at the moment. So this is a kind of an overview just to have a look at some of the key foods that we're looking at globally in terms of insect pollination. I just have a few examples here. First of all, we have fruit, the likes of apples, blueberries, watermelon. And also almonds. I have almonds on the map over America, California, because about 80% of the world's almond supply is grown in California. And almonds are extremely, extremely reliant on insect pollinators to be successful. And also the likes of cocoa. So that is another one that's extremely dependent on insect pollinators. I'll get into that again with a bit of a case study in a minute. But that's specifically in South America and Western Africa, they're extremely reliant, the cocoa crop, on our insect pollinators. So this is a little bit more into detail on what we're looking at here. So far on the far left in the yellow, it might be a bit hard to read actually on the screen, but we're looking at the minimal dependency crop. So those that rely minimally on insect pollination. So we're here looking at the likes of our staple crops, like I said before, our wheat, our maize, our barley, our corn. So that's a large volume produced. But actually a lot of them are there's a very few number of these crops grown in terms of genetic variation. A lot of them are all the same, grown globally. And say if pollinators were to vanish in the morning, they would have minimal yield reduction. But like I said, there is a limited variety of species that can be grown that way. And then in the middle, in the orange, this is where the majority of our food species would fall I've named it here, modest to significant dependency. And so that means that while if pollinators did vanish in the morning, there would be some growth still happening, some production, but it would be either moderately or drastically reduced. So I have here a yield reduction of 10 to 90%. So that is broad, but that's where the majority of our food products are going to be lying, our food species. It's not very black and white. A lot of them are going to be somewhere in the middle. And so in this, what we see in this section are a lot of the oil crops, our sunflower, our rapeseed, all the other oil crops that are used worldwide would be in this significantly affected category, as well as the likes of some of our favorite fruits, our strawberries, our apples, our pears, stone fruits, as well as coffee beans, which is interesting, because primarily when we're looking at coffee, where we are here, we're primarily looking at Arabica. But then there's also Robusta beans. They're the two main types that we're looking at. And Arabica is actually much less reliant in terms of yield on insect pollinators, but where the Robusta is much more, but we do get a good, while it will still produce without pollinators, it will produce much better with, you know. So it's often a case of that where you still will get some production, but if we do have an abundance of pollinators, it will produce much more effectively. And then on the far right here in the red, we're looking at those that have, I've called it complete. It's either near or complete dependency on insect pollinators. So here we have the likes of cocoa beans, like I mentioned earlier. The likes of our nuts and nut species. One that you might think of, vanilla, used widely in everyday life. That's extremely pollinator dependent. And also some very specific fruits and vegetables, like the likes of kiwis and pumpkins. And I have it here as if pollinators again vanish in the morning, we would have a yield reduction of greater than 90%, near total reduction. So what does the decline in insect pollinators mean for us and our food system? So the first one you think of, obviously, is going to mean food shortages. There's going to be a vastly reduced diversity, a vastly reduced choice of fruit and veg. Like we were talking about before, you'd have limited certain foods like nuts and coffee, and also no chocolate. You know, that's one that people really feel a lot about, feel some strong feelings about. And one that as well that you mightn't necessarily make the initial link with is animal products. You know, when people think of pollinators, you think of your fruit, your veg, flowers, that kind of thing. But it actually would have a dramatic impact on animal products as well, because we don't necessarily think about it, but a lot of the feedstock that is grown to feed to our animals is pollinator reliant, the likes of clover, alfalfa, and also grassland. The nutrition of grassland is greatly dependent on the variety of plants that are grown. And so then if we do have a reduction in pollinators, it would also have an impact on our animal products. And this would potentially lead to higher prices, you know, so these pollinator dependent foods will become a luxury. And then following on from this, we could be looking at the likes of nutritional deficiencies, as well as severe economic consequences and reduced food security. So you've probably seen these pictures before. This was, I think, published a couple of years ago in an article speaking about the importance of pollinators. So this is a supermarket fruit and veg section. And again, I think that looking at this is what it would look like if we were to lose our pollinators. So it essentially shows us, like I was saying before, the diversity is dramatically affected. You'll still have something, but your diversity of food available to you, and again, that comes with that, the diversity of nutrition, ease of access, so a wide variety of foods, would be severely limited. And again, here we have from the same article looking at the dairy side of things. So you would as well have a reduction in the availability of animal products, dairy and meat, as well as them just being a lot more expensive and a luxury product. So here we have a little bit of a case study that I was looking at. So this is focusing on our cocoa beans. So cocoa beans are one of the crops that are significantly reliant on insect pollinators. And they're in a bit of a dilemma at the moment, because there's a quote here from a US professor, and he says, the crop sustainability currently appears to depend on several species of tiny fly pollinators who are frankly struggling to get the job done. So on the far right here, it's basically showing something you might necessarily think of as a pollinator, but it's a biting fly. It's a small midge, right? That's the genus name. I did look up how to say it, but I'm not going to try and say it. But yeah, essentially the problem that cocoa trees are having is that there's a lot of flowers on these trees, but the flowers are absolutely minuscule. You can see here in the picture, that's the adult thumb, you know? So they're about 1 centimeter in size altogether. And the structure of the flower means that the pollen is actually up inside the flower. So that means that they're severely limited in what pollinators can actually be effective in cross-pollination between cocoa trees. You know, so these flies are pretty much, there's a lot of species within this genus, but they're all basically, they're what's making cocoa production possible at the moment. And they grow to about 2 or 3 millimeters, I think, so that's what allows that to happen. But it's actually interesting, because when I was reading up on this, cocoa production is actually massively inefficient as it is at the moment. You know, so the cocoa flowers themselves, there might be a variety of flowers, a wide abundance of flowers on the tree, but only 1 to 5% of those flowers actually receive enough pollen to develop into cocoa pods. So if you think about it, there's the less pollinators you have, which is an issue they're having now at the moment, because they are being threatened by the consequences of what I have there at the bottom of the slide. But it's it's an endless cycle, because if you have less pollinators, you're going to have less yield, and then you're going to need to expand your plantation to try and meet the demand of consumers. You know, so at the moment it's already very inefficient. So it's interesting to think about, if they could improve the efficiency of pollination, you could probably reach the same amount of cocoa beans with much less land use. You know, so it's just interesting. It's something I wasn't aware of before kind of looking into it. But yeah, it's extremely interesting. So they are struggling very much to even get the crop that we have now. And yeah, so I'm saying they're threatened by the likes of deforestation and monoculture. You know, and some of the studies looking at increasing pollination in cocoa trees, they're purely done on cocoa plantations. So there's actually interest on whether in the wild, on wild cocoa trees, is that a lot different to how they're farmed, and how we can maybe implement techniques used that would be more typical in the wild growth to the plantation. So this, yeah, I spoke about it briefly already, but just moving on to the threats to these pollinator-dependent food crops. It's the typical ones that we've spoken a lot about, the likes of habitat loss, urbanization, and the loss of green spaces, mass agriculture and monoculture. Like I mentioned already, a lot of the crops we're growing are the same crops, and there's a very limited amount of genetic diversity and plant diversity being grown worldwide in our major food systems. And also biodiversity loss. And then, of course, the likes of pesticides used in mass agriculture, contaminated water, and also, again, habitat loss due to those contaminations, as well as the likes of climate change, where our local pollinators are going to struggle to adapt to conditions, as conditions are changing too quickly, and also the likes of disease and parasites. So in terms of thinking about the role of sustainable agriculture in food security, there's an emphasis on increasing mixed farming and crop diversity, like I was saying, increasing the variety of crops that are being grown to increase our food security, reducing pesticide use, and also increasing organic farming. And there was actually an interesting study looking at saying that organic farms, we observed, had 50% more pollinators in terms of species richness than conventional farms. And there's also the likes of the Irish initiatives, such as the All Ireland Pollinator Plan and Acres, which is a successor to GLOS, giving advice for agriculture as well as community level things, such as wild areas, field margins, and hedgerow, to let them grow a bit wild, allow a bit more green space. So in terms of what consumers can do to protect pollinator-dependent foods, we can make pollinator-friendly food choices, where we can choose local, choose organic food, choose sustainable, and we can support sustainable agriculture. And another thing we can do is look at reducing our food waste. A lot of the food that we're producing is actually being wasted, and we're creating this demand and then wasting the food. So if we're creating less food waste, we have the potential to maybe reduce demand and therefore reduce stress on our pollinators. And as well, as we were mentioned before in the earlier talk, you can create pollinator-friendly habitats at home with native planting and eliminating your use of pesticides. But I think when we're talking about food systems, a lot of it is at a much larger level than what we can control at home, So I think one of the key things that we can do is advocate for pollinator protection policies in terms of our food production system. So just to kind of finish up, in terms of what the future of food could look like, you can say, oh, well, look, artificial pollination, you can do that. But it is massively expensive and labor intensive. So it is possible, scientifically, you can do it. But conservation is much cheaper to preserve what we have and encourage what we have in terms of what nature has given us, that a system that does work, we just need to protect it. And it is just my closing statement, a food system without pollinators would have less variety, higher food costs, and lower food quality. Thank you very much. And then just before I finish, and you'll hear more about this later, but one of the points of the seminar today from the IBCP, we're looking to form an advisory panel. And we're looking for participants from a wide variety of backgrounds and to help us in our spreading the message and to develop a greater understanding of how pollinators sustain nature and in moving towards a more pollinator-friendly city. So you'll hear more about that later, but we will be looking for people to come join us and join this advisory panel. Thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Dr. Signe Martin. She's another new volunteer with us with the IBCP Outreach and Education team. She's a marine biologist. When we were all small and we all were asked what we want to do, it was either a marine biologist or a vet, as far as I remember. But Signe went on and actually did do it, went all the way. So well done on that. She has a PhD specialising in microbes and parasites of crustaceans. She has an interest in how ecosystems and species interact. And today she'll be talking to us on some of the stresses that these face and what we can do to support them. So welcome, Signe Martin, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As Rachel said, my name is Signe. My background would be in marine biology, but I'm a new volunteer with IBCP. And I was really interested in looking at the factors that are impacting bees, and of course, from my background, the connection to water, and some of the actions we can take to help support them. So globally, pollinator populations are declining. 40% of invertebrate pollinators are at risk of extinction. Within Ireland, a third of our species are threatened with extinction. Both of these figures also are from 2016, so we can only imagine what they might be now. The main driver of these declines is habitat loss. So these physically lose their access to their nesting and feeding grounds. You can also have fragmentation of habitat, so it's getting broken up. A lot of bees can only travel so far, so that's important for them. And degradation, which leads into another factor, contaminants, harmful contaminants. So these can be things like microplastics, heavy metals, nitrogen, fertilizers, pesticides. All of those things are harmful inputs into our environment. And climate change, of course, is another big topic right now. That can impact something like the blooming time of a flower, which then impacts the bee. And then also disease and invasive species. Something to note is that all of these can be linked and co-occur, so then you're looking at a cumulative effect. So maybe a bee exposed to one pesticide can be okay, but then it's exposed to 4 different pesticides and disease and habitat loss, and that's a lot impacting them then. So what do bees need? They need food in the form of nectar and pollen from a diverse range of flowering plants. They need nesting sites and shelter, and overall healthy habitats and clean waters link into those healthy habitats. Bees, like us, do drink water from small water sources like puddles. It's important for their overall health. They use it in hydration, cooling, digestion, and they also need it to build their nests. So 80% of Irish bees are ground nesters, so they need that damp soil to create their nest. Another connection, those plants the bees feed on also need clean water to be healthy. It impacts their growth, their survival, and the quality and quantity of their nectar and pollen. And those plants also need to be growing in areas that are healthy with clean water. Healthy water systems from wetlands to rivers, the damp soil in grasslands and meadows all support flowering plants, which in turn support bees. Picture here a river with lovely greenery either side. I'll call it a riparian zone. These are really important areas. They can provide a buffer between land activities and the water, so all of those root systems can prevent harmful contaminants coming into the water. And they provide a whole range of ecosystems, really, but also flowering plants for pollinators. So how do harmful contaminants get into those water sources? It can be from industrial, residential, agricultural sources. Things like pesticides and soil runoff can enter and accumulate in the water sources that bees are drinking from, can get into the soil, the plant, and the nectar and pollen that the bees are directly ingesting. And if we think of a poor bee, their bodies are very small, so a small amount of contaminants in water or mud can harm their health, their navigation, their microbiome, their nesting behaviors, and of course, mortality. So in summary, we want to support healthy and biodiverse habitats that will in turn support pollinators. Healthy land, healthy water, and healthy pollinators all comes together, and that of course has benefits for humans as well. So what can we actually do? On the big scale, it's a lot about land management. So making sure we're reducing harmful inputs as much as we can, planting buffer zones. So having that buffer between an activity that may cause pollution and a water source or other area. And regenerative farming practices are being more discussed now. They overall encourage biodiversity, good quality soils, and therefore still supporting production. Restoring and maintaining the habitats we do have. So between 2013 and 2019, 30% of our meadows were lost. It was really great to hear from the council, from Rosemary, all the meadows and planting that's happening in Cork City. And of course, supporting research and monitoring and education is really important. Research is what has led to us understanding whether we need pesticides and fertilizers and what kind of alternatives we could be looking at. For example, this year I saw this study from Ireland where they were using a biostimulant from Irish brown seaweed to put on fields, and they were then able to reduce fertilizer, increase soil health, and reduce the amount of fertilizer that they needed. Then on the urban scale, again, planting native, planting green spaces and utilising the green spaces we already have through pollinator pathways and encouraging wildflower growth and initiatives like No Mow May, and education around and encouraging the reduction of pesticides. Again, it was great to hear from Rosemary. A lot of these actions are happening in Cork City. And the good news is we can all do something at the individual level in our own gardens. The two main threats to bees is that habitat loss and loss of feeding grounds, and that's something we can all try and provide in our own gardens by planting native flowers, trees and hedgerows. Beware of wildflower mixes that may not be native. We can encourage reduction of pesticides. We can even provide a water source for the bees to drink from. You just have to make sure to clean that and change it regularly to reduce risk of bird disease, and not mowing. For shelter for bees, You can provide bare soil patches, soil banks that the bees can nest into, leaving any dead material like logs in your garden. A fun activity could be to make a bee lodge where you have canes or bamboo all together, or even just drilling some holes in a piece of wood for your bees. And these shelters should be facing the morning sun. I'll just highlight this lovely reader from the All Ireland Pollinator Plan that highlights all of the different things you can do in your garden and specifies the specific species you should be on the lookout for. I hope the message here is that small actions can create a healthier environment and really help support our pollinators. And I'll flag again what Alice mentioned, the advisory panel, that we can hopefully discuss a bit more at the end on how we can move forward together to create a more pollinator-friendly city. And that's it for me. Thanks for listening.
It's just interesting to hear, you know, that in Ireland we never think to worry about water being a problem. But I suppose with climate change, we're seeing more and more kind of larger events where there's flooding, and that's where those contaminants, there's a lot of that where contaminants might have been put somewhere and now suddenly they're over here, and that's impacting on our pollinators. It's also nice to see the connection there that's been posed between Rosemary and Signe's presentation, just talking about how much we can do in our own back gardens. To think that the amount of hectares that is in private gardens in Cork City is almost the same as, you know, the parks and that are managed by Cork City Council. I think that's very heartening to think that we absolutely can do something in our own small way to make a big difference locally. So our final presentation is from Mike Walsh. He's like the song New York, New York, so good he named him twice, because I put your name down twice on the poster there, Mike. Mike is from SETU University in Waterford, and he lectures on the master's program there on organic and biological agriculture. He lectures in ruminant livestock management, soil health and water management, and also irrigation and wetland system. So I'd like you to welcome Mike Walsh.
Okay, afternoon everybody. It's lovely to see this kind of group with all this much information getting together and highlighting where we are, where we need to be, where we need to go, and all of the potholes and bumps that we're going to see all along the way, you know. So there's been, and our presentations are brilliant. We've looked at what we can do locally, and we heard a peep at what's happening globally. And really, it's a combination of all of those put together that we can hopefully make an impact on. But it's not going to be an easy task by any means, because we have a lot of, I won't say competition, but resistance, I think, in what we're trying to do in changing the way we produce food. And from my perspective, food is really, really important. From where we are, food production globally is under pressure. So any change or anything we propose or bring forward, we really have to keep in mind that we have to feed a global population. And that's getting more and more and more difficult. Not because we haven't the technology or because we haven't the land. It's hugely impacted or controlled by the existing systems that are there. And that's the issue that we have to tackle. So I'm in SETU, and we do a master's in organic and biological agriculture, where we introduced that a couple of years ago. And it's really looking at how we can bring chemical farming back to a more natural production system, you know. And immediately when you listen to people trying to move from the existing chemical farming system back to an organic type of system, they immediately think, right, we're not going to be able to produce as much. That's absolute garbage. We can absolutely produce every bit as much, and in fact, we can do better if we take the right approach on it. So I like to look at ruminant livestock management, feeding cows. That's one of the main areas I have. But I could say that's environment. Everything we do with ruminant livestock today is about environment and looking after the environment. And if we do that, we look after that ruminant. And I'll highlight that as we go through. Soil health and water management. We all the time talk about healthy soils. And what we don't talk about enough is the life in our soils. That's where all the action happens. And that's what we need to promote and get out there and get the general population into understanding what we're doing and how to manage that as well. We have irrigation and wetland systems. We've got a lot of wetland systems down the Anne Valley in Dunhill and Waterford where I live. And we'll have a look at that. I think I've gone the wrong way here. Yeah, here we go. So this is a farm we have in the Anne Valley. And I've been working with this farmer for more than 20 years now. And we've actually taken over the farm now and are continuing on the management on it. But what we're looking at, like in food production, you can see there we have a whole range of different plant species in the sward for the cows. There's very little grass in the pasture anymore. We don't need it. It's not that efficient. When we moved away to more diverse swards, we're getting much healthier animals, much better production, and overall the whole system is working a lot better. So, okay, it's the Monday morning syndrome here. Right. If we look at our biome, what's a biome? So a naturally occurring community of flora and fauna occupying a habitat, right? And it can be local or global, like an ocean, a forest, a desert, a farm, a field, a gut biome, right? So back to food and food health. So it's macro, but it's also micro. And the micro is the one that's really, really, really important for us. And inside that gut biome, it's like, and in nature, we have a phenomenal amount of biodiversity. That's really important. And our earlier speaker pointed out we have 70% of our food globally produced from very few crops, monoculture systems, and if we lose our pollinators, it's all this biodiversity that we're going to lose, and that's really going to impact. But it's really, really, really important to keep all of that in there. Down the Anne Valley here, we've got 18 protected wildlife species, and they just keep flourishing. Just recently, we have a new one, the Eurasian hooper. I saw that just when I came around the corner coming up from my house the other day. So it's only in recently, and I was delighted. I thought I can interview this now, and I saw on my phone and the messages, Cork, I've got about 60 to 70 of them somewhere. Right, but anyhow, but I think we found first. So diversity is hugely important in terms of food and food production and nutrition generally. So with food, you are what you eat. How many of us have heard that over and over and over and over and over again? And God, it's so true. So we look at the bigger picture here, at the global picture, right? And this project that was centered in South Africa, they collected samples from all over the world and surveys and everything, and put them all together, accumulated in South Africa, and when started going through all of that data, and the study expanded the knowledge between urban and rural gut biomes, right? And they noticed a very distinct difference depending where you are living, what kind of microbes live in your gut biome, in your digestive tract, right? And one of the key things about the composition, function, and diversity of the gut biome depends literally on what you eat, where you come from, and the availability of the foods in all those areas, right? So this overall study, what they concluded was geographical location determines gut health. Right, so where you live depends on how healthy you are, because it determines what kind of foods you have and how they're produced and what type of soil they're from. Right. So food deserts, this came up a lot, and in different regions around the world, even in areas where there's high populations, because of our food production system, again, which is kind of a monoculture system in a lot of areas for the main bulk of food, you can live in an area where there isn't that diversity. And this is a really good example here from the US Department of Agriculture, just back in 2019. If you look at these areas, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, all the Corn Belt areas, all monoculture areas, right? And people in that area haven't got access to locally produced food. You can get it frozen in the supermarket, but you can't go down to the food market and buy it because they grow corn, wheat, bulk food products. So the diversity is gone. But in the background there, what it doesn't really show, how is it grown? Grown with chemical fertilizers and tillage and cultivation. And we'll go into that a little bit more. So they're all the monoculture states, if you like. So if we look at, again, the gut and the gut biome and what's happening there, the technology works here. Yeah, here we go. So we've got a massive amount of let's be slow again. We have a massive amount of microbes working around in that gut biome that you see on top there. That's just the inside of the intestine, and you have all this type of microbial activity happening right there, right? So we depend massively on these microbes, whether it's out in the soil, on plants, or even in our digestive tract. We are so hugely dependent on microbes. It's an area we really need to pay a lot more attention to and protect them and not damage that. This new study just published recently, so just on January 25, they're looking at RNA on leaves, right? So the findings are suggesting that RNA present on the leaf surface may play a role in shaping microbial communities that inhabit them. And that the impact there, again, is very, very significant, because you have all these interactions with that environment, right? So that RNA, ribonucleic acid, right? It's basically, if you take a DNA strand and divide it, you have the RNA, and there's a whole range of different RNA sequences or strands. You have messenger RNA, right? That directs which proteins are produced. Okay, we have transfer of gene information, right, from one cell to another, from one animal to another. Then we have small interfering RNAs to spread throughout the plant and trigger secondary step of the immune response system. So again, these interfering RNAs, transfer of immunity, disease resistance, all of those areas. And now the previous slide, we're finding these on leaf surfaces, right? So pollinators, how important are they at transferring all these messages from one plant to another, from one environment to another, from one community to another, right? And then intergenic RNA, again, these are the longest strands, and they do the protein coding to make sure the species is stable. And we have these the micro RNA, and they control gene expression. So plants and animals, we have a phenomenal bank of genes in there in those cells, right? Not all of them are active. Some genes are dormant, and they'll only become active when they get a poke, right? So again, we'll go back to the leaf and the RNA found on the leaf surfaces, right? So if there's something attacking that leaf, again, the message has to get to the plant, I'm being attacked, right? And I need to kick off my defense system. And that's where these micro, those genes are wakened up and they get into action, right? And that's from an energy perspective as well. They're not using energy when they're not needed, but they're there as soon as they are needed to move things along. So if we take that into the soil and have a look at the soil biome versus the surface, we often look at these as two separate entities, what's happening, plants, animals, and everything on the surface, because we see it every day. We forget about what's happening underneath, but there's as much diversity in that soil underneath as there is on the surface. And again, that's something we need to nurture and look after, right? And that diversity of terrestrial microbes, it decreases a little bit with depth as we go down, but we've been looking, as I on the farm that I showed you at the beginning, we've been looking at going away from shallow rooted plants to deep rooting plants and trying to extend that diversity and try to get access, if you like, to that massive, massive reservoir of nutrients that we've got down there in the soil. So I just tell you, this is going to come up again. So I'm just pointing it out there. The community composition overlaps between surface to subsurface. So they're not two separate entities. There's a lot of overlap between them, and particularly at microbial level. And again, that's where all the action really happens. Just to demonstrate here on what we're trying to do, I just had to split the screen in two here. I wasn't able to show deep enough on a single one. But if you look at just that point there, we look down a meter down into the soil. We see up on the other side, that rock that you see circulated, there. That's it up there. So it's a continuum, if you like, going right down. And 67 centimeters down, you can see visible root just there at that point. Right? That's one season's growth. Right? That's a plantain. Okay, you can see the leaves just on the top left-hand corner of the screen there. We're using crops like plantain, chicory, sheaf burnet, sheaf sorrel, yarrow, a mixture of legumes, herbs going in there, very little grasses, because we find they don't perform as well. The nutrient density is not as good. So we moved away from that, but we're now tapping into that deep reservoir of nutrients that hasn't been utilized up to this point, or hasn't been available because we don't have the right plant structure on top. We just have monoculture grasses, unfortunately, and it's getting that knowledge out there. So again, looking at the micro, what else is down there? Once we get activity down there, we get a lot more mobilization of nutrients for plants, for animals, for food production, for humans. More energy dense food is the end result of that. And in that soil biome, the microbiome, we've got fungi that they play a massive role in feeding the plant nutrients, along with breaking down old material and releasing the nutrients from that. Got bacteria, right? So they're all there, but we need to nurture them. We need to grow them, if you like, rather than impact on them. And every time we disturb all that side, we do impact negatively on those microbes. And this is just a list of what's in there. We have mineral, this is electron microscope scan, bacteria, protozoa, organic matter, fungi, all mixed up there in those soils, right? This is a scan of a rumen, rumen bacteria, or rumen fluid. We've got minerals, organic matter, protozoa, bacteria, and fungi. Pretty much all the same as what we have in our soils. Pretty much the same groups. So even within the animal, within the rumen, there's a direct correlation with the colonies that we've got in each of those areas. Right, so it's really important. And here's the ruminant, the cow. So we have protozoa, bacteria, fungi. They're in there in the soil, and they're in there in the rumen. So there's a very direct relationship there, like between the two. About a year and a half or 2 years ago, I remember I was watching some of the late programs after the news. I can't remember which one it was, but I had this idiot who called himself a scientist saying one of the things that we should do to stop producing too much methane is get rid of all these cows off the planet. I don't think I need comment more on that guy. But look at the connect, between surface and subsurface. Okay, now that one that I circled earlier is the community composition overlaps between surface and subsurface environments. And it's really, really strong connection between the two. And here's another one. If you look at this here, you can see the root exudate. Although we can't see that. Or I'll just go over here. You can see the root exudate here. Like this is a chicory plant. The root on that plant gets down about a meter in just a season or more than a season. So I was trying to dig down a little bit and get that big taproot, pull it up. I got it up and I just sliced it, and this root exudate started to flow out almost immediately. Right, and after about 30 seconds, you can see just that point there where the milky material is not quite lined. If you look at after about 30 seconds later, you see the gap is closed in here. So it's just literally flowing. Likewise down further, at the end, you see the size of that droplet compared to 30 seconds earlier. Plants on the surface, through photosynthesis, produce sugars. So it's not a one-way street. They don't only take nutrients up from the soil. They produce energy from the sun, produce sugars, and they feed those sugars back down to the microbes and the fungi. And this is a demonstration of that. This is the flow of nutrient going back down into the soil to feed that microbial population. Right, so those plants, getting the right plants up there, getting the deep root system working, getting those roots right down there. That's what we're trying to do in expanding that soil microbial population from just the top 200 millimeters maybe down to a meter or down much further. And if they get down there, if they get working, those microbes pull the nutrients off the soils and help and feed them onto the plants. Right, but we have to feed the microbes down there. We have to get them down there, get their population growing to make all that massive reservoir of material available. And it's simple. There's no great chemistry or anything involved. It's just putting the right plant species in place. So, that'll be nice. Right, a lot of you will have heard of this rhizobium. Right, this bacteria fixes nitrogen. Right, if you pull up a clover plant, you see these little nodules. Right, you pull them on a white plate and crush them. And if you get a slightly pink color, you see, then that's a really, really active plant. There's a lot of microbial or rhizobium activity in that. This is another one you probably have heard of. These are just petri dish size because they're a bit small to try and take pictures of them. Frankia, another nitrogen fixing bacteria that we have in the soil. You don't hear a lot of it, but it's there. This one, click. Streptomyces. It's the soil bacteria. We associate more as with an antibiotic. Right? This one, Pseudomonas, another soil bacteria. Depending on your dairy pharmacy, you immediately associate that with mastitis. That's because one of the species does cause mastitis infections. Streptomyces, Pseudomonas are also nitrogen-fixing bacteria in our soils. Right? And here's another 16 nitrogen-fixing bacteria in our soils. Why do we only hear of this one? Rhizobium. Because you can culture that and sell it. So it has commercial value. The rest of them don't. So they don't matter. Right? So, This study goes back a little bit, almost 170 years, to be exact, where it's Park Rotterdam, where they're looking at the impact of fertilizers. That's the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK. You're all familiar with those in journals, in advertising, as a necessity for food production. Are they really? But look at the impact there. Those NPK fertilizers can reduce flower numbers fivefold and half the number of pollinating insects in agricultural land. And this is not yesterday's information, it's last century information, almost 2 centuries back. Right? They also found that reducing the fertilizer applications increased the numbers, species, richness, and functional diversity of both the flowers and the pollinating insects. So just pulling back those fertilizers a little bit has almost an immediate impact. Yeah. Soil and water form, looking at the impact of fertilizers on soil salinity. And I do a lot of work I've done a lot of work in the Middle East, in the deserts, and I still do, unfortunately. And in those warmer climates, we really see the impact of the soil salinity, because along with fertilizers, you have irrigation water and you have evaporation, and then you have condensation of the salt in that irrigation water as well. So it's a snowballing negative effect on the soils. So almost 10% of the global land area is affected by salinity, right? And this is the FAO, the United Nations. That potentially, now with global warming again, that could go up to 32% overall. Salinity stress can lead to crop yield loss, like rice and beans, which are really important globally, of up to 70% in those areas where you've got that soil salinity. So that's a big chunk of food production coming out. And the response to that is we try to leach out the salt by using more, flush them out, by using more irrigation, which is more waste of water, a really global important resource, the most important resource we've got. But thank heavens, farmers in Africa are blaming chemical fertilizers for increasingly acidic soils that lead to production decline. And they're starting to recognize that, right? And I think because they don't have the same media influence and government influence on their production locally, I think they might back out from using too much chemical fertilizers and go back to what they were doing and get better production and try and manage their soils better and have healthier soils. This is a chemical analysis in 23 we took from the farm I showed you at the very beginning. And it's very difficult. The departments are requiring these soil tests right now. So we did this in 23, we did another one in 24. And just to go through it, if you look at soil pH, right, we generally look to get the soil close to 7. You'll see advertisements and directives from the department now about putting out lime. Have you done the soil testing? Have you applied lime? In our case, no, we haven't. We haven't applied lime for 6 years. Right. Back in 2005, on that same farm, the lime requirement was 7.5 tons per hectare. there's chemical fertilizers being used then. For the last 7 years that they haven't been used, and we haven't had to apply lime because it's those chemical fertilizers were impacting on the soil pH. Once we removed them, everything settled down very, very well. Right? Phosphorus, soil P. The guideline is you try to keep it at index 3. Index 4, you've got a little bit too much in the soil. So if you apply it in a chemical fertilizer format, it'll be leached into the groundwater and into the environment. Right. We're at index 4. We have 1, 2, 3 plots at index 3, and they're coming up. What's bringing them up? If we look at K, potassium, again, they're all index 4, except those same 2 areas, almost. So we don't need lime. Our P index is higher than it need be. Our K index is higher than it needs to be. We haven't applied any chemical fertilizers. How are we getting these high figures? Go back to those plants, deep roots, tapping into nutrients that have never been used. Plants are bringing them to the surface because the bacteria are loading them in. Right, cows are eating them. We recycle all that nutrient, all the slurry out onto the surface. So we're getting an accumulation of those nutrients right up on the surface. Right. So even though we're removing forage from the soil, we're removing milk from the farm, we're only replacing the slurry. It's just a closed system. And our nutrient status, our soil nutrient status is going up and up and up and up. But the question here, this is all chemical testing. Why is nobody recommending biological testing? No, soil organic matter, soil microbial activity, soil microbial mass. They're the important ones. But this phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, these are the commercial ones. Again, that's why the focus is there. And do we need them? Here's evidence that we don't. Absolutely, we don't. I think if I move. And the sound is working. Right, this is the same farm. That land has got no chemical fertilizers for almost 7 years. We're getting better productivity per hectare than farmers using chemical fertilizers, fungicides, insecticides, and plastic. Right? Imagine the cost to those farmers compared to that system. That got 4 applications. The land got 2 applications of slurry before planting and 2 immediately after planting. And a winter crop went straight in there again. That's growing away over the winter. And that's our first cut of soil is coming in 3 weeks' time. And then it goes back in. And this crop is a mixture of maize and beans. Right, we've gone away from maize monoculture as well. We're including beans as a legume in there, so it's fixing nitrogen in the soil. The runner beans, so the maize comes up pretty much the same time, but the maize has a direct growth. The runner beans cover ground space, so they compete with weeds. And when all the ground space is full, the maize is about 1/2 meter high nearly, and then the beans start to climb up, and the maize stays ahead. So, sorry. There's a blend of about 4 different varieties that come in the bag, but they're runner beans. They crawl, right, and they climb. Yeah, and that's bringing up our our forage nutrient value, higher energy density, higher protein, right? And all those are expensive. So it's working well without these chemical fertilizers. And I suppose this is coming to the crunch point, if you like. These chemical fertilizers, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, they're the ones we hear about over and over and over and over again, right? So these are the ones you come across generally. 18612, that's a compound mixture of NPK. 272.5, 5, again another compound. 7617, sulfate of potassium, but it's got N and P in there as well. And then we have the two on the bottom, net nitrate. That's a 27% nitrogen fertilizer, so it's not a compound. It's a straight, it's in the industry. And then we have sulcan, 26.5% nitrogen, sulfur in there, right? And that's what we see advertised and promoted. This is what the soil needs to grow crops. This is what you don't see. These same fertilizers. Heavy metal content. Through the list of metals on the left-hand side. Arsenic, cadmium, mercury, chromium, lead. All stuff that you have in your food every day, yeah? Right. And when you look across, now they're only in milligrams per kilogram, right? They're very small amounts. But you look at the amount of fertilizer we bring into the country annually, and it's all land spread. And go down to the bottom on lead, there's 32.1 tons land spread. It mightn't sound an awful lot when you spread it over a big area of land. But what kind of a health impact does that have? Centers of Disease Control and Prevention and other health organizations emphasize that there is no known safe levels of lead exposure in children. And even at low levels, it can negatively impact a child's development and health. And we've got this in every one of those fertilizers that we put out, along with the chromium, the mercury, cadmium, and the arsenic. So you've got a lovely cocktail there. Right. The new buzzword, slow release urea, a slow release nitrogen. Right. N-butyl, how does it achieve that? Right. The fertilizer granule is coated with a substance called N-butyl thiophosphoric triamide. And that's the chemical details on it there. You can see these symbols, right? We'll get to that in a minute. But the main impact of this, how does it work? It inhibits the soil urease enzyme. Right, so that natural urease enzyme is down there, and those bacteria that you saw earlier producing nitrogen, right, this urease enzyme helps those bacteria to transfer the nitrogen and feed it to the plant. So if you block that enzyme from working, which is what this product does, now even the natural nitrogen can't get to the plant. So effectively you've got a soil sterilant. So along with using those chemicals to roast the bacteria out of it, we've now gone the next step, or the chemical industry have gone the next step in sterilizing soils as much as they can. right? There was a claim by Teagasc and other European entities that this product wasn't taken up by the plant. It broke down very quickly and it was neutralized in the soil. Right, so we thought we'd have a look at that ourselves. So I got the guys in the chemistry department to get me the pure sample. I still have some of them in the fridge in the lab. And we ran it through a HPLC, high pressure chromatography unit, and got the profile, got the spike. So we found we were able to register that. And then we applied some of this slow release urea onto some plant trial plots. And we used the other fertilizers as well, just to make sure we covered the broader spectrum and everything. And took some samples back, took the extract from the grasses, ran it through the HPLC, and look what we found where we had the slow release urea spread. Plain as day. Now, how anybody can say that they couldn't find that or that it wasn't taken up by the plants, it baffles me. They must have tried very hard. Either that or else our undergrads are better qualified already than Teagasc and the department guys. And that's worrying. But I was very happy to find later, we're not the only ones that found it. Right? We had another paper published that found exactly the same thing, but they went a step further, which is where we intended going. That NBPT has also been found in milk and meat. So it's going the whole way through the system. Right? But on the health issue, it is also carcinogenic and it inhibits embryonic growth. So it's going to impact the animal fertility. If it's gone into milk and meat, it's going to impact human fertility. And this is the new environmental protection solution from our department. Brilliant, isn't it? And on mineral deficiencies, here's the cow giving us a little chemistry lesson here. Right. There's some cultivated land here right beside the paddock. And you see the cow come over to the edge. She's licking the soil. And you see where she moved over the sod to get underneath it. Right. Why? Because that pasture that she's on hasn't got the uprooting system. There's chemical fertilizers being used. So because of those chemical fertilizer impacts, there's an absence of microbial activity. So there's nothing there to feed the nutrients for the pasture. But I can't remember the guy's name, one of our predecessors in science said cows are capable chemists. And there's a demonstration. She knew exactly where to go and find her minerals because she didn't have them in the plants. Right. We looked at this as well. Just another one of our students did this. We looked at a whole range of different swarts where there was nitrogen applied and no nitrogen applied. And this was in tillage. Once the temperatures come up and plants started growing, we measured the respiration from the soil, the microbial activity, just as an indicator. And we had a much higher respiration rate where there was no chemical nitrogen applied than where it was applied. So there's an impact there on those microbes. Here's another one. If you look at this picture, I got this from one of my students. There's one of the students that did some of the other work with us. This is the home farm, and she was looking at what we were doing and went home and advised the farmers to plant some, go away from grasses and plant multi-species. And she sent me this picture back. And you can see that line to the right and the left. There's much more vigorous growth to the left than there is on the right-hand side. They still have a good bit of grassland at that time on the farm. And her dad was spreading chemical fertilizer on it, and he had a little bit left in the tank. Came back in and he says, I'll give this multi-species a little boost. So he did, and he ran up that section there, and there's the result. And he put out 30 kilos per hectare. That was in 21, 14/8/21. And I got a picture and a small message, and I cannot repeat the message. But she wasn't too happy with her dad. Right. But look at the impact there of those chemicals on those plants. Right. And the impact of all that and looking after those microbes on our food nutrient density. Right. We got this table, crop density comparison. So they looked at a whole different range of species. But look at who's doing it. National Library of Medicine. It's from a health perspective. It's not the Department of Agriculture. It's not Teagasc. It's not any of our researchers. Why? Because our universities are not getting the funding to do this type of research. But it's great that somebody is. And what that study came up with is that the soil health metrics for regenerative and conventional agriculture. Look at the density in the regenerative compared to the conventional. The food nutrient density. Right. When you go to the conventional or chemical agriculture, if you look at carrots, look at tomatoes, we've got colourful blobs of water with very little nutrient density in them. You know, they don't last long on the shelf. But it's coming from the medical side. But thank heavens it's coming from somewhere. On a farm, the landowner's daughter is building a new house. Right, she got planning permission, so they're working on that this year. So that patch of land is gone from us now. But there's a bit at the end of the site that she'll be taking, and she said, right, you can work away there. Okay, we'll use our chemical fertilizers here. And this started not to contaminate the rest of our land or whatever. So what we did, we use we have our controls, we have those standard chemicals again, 27, 2.5, 5, 10, 10, 20, calcium, ammonia, and nitrate, plus sulfur and calcium ammonia as a straight. We've also used 2 slurries. We treat slurry with an enzyme, natural enzyme, to make the nutrients more available from it. But when we've taken those soil samples, what we're trying to do is differentiate. In the soil, we have 15% organic matter in the soil on the farm on average. And what we're trying to do is look at that organic matter. We're looking at the impact of the chemical fertilizers on it and looking at what potentially it does to those microbes down in the soil. So we have to quantify what amount of microbes are there, what's the microbial mass, distinguish that from the overall organic material, because we've got a whole range of other materials in there, necrotic vegetation and everything else. So it's pulling them out, seeing what microbes are in there, what groups are in there, what species of fungi and bacteria, right? So on the trial, we applied chemical fertilizers and urea. And if you look down the right-hand side here, on the the DNA, the PCR screen before we send the sample off. We'll have the results coming back for this. It's going to take about another, I think it'll be back the end of next week, and then it'll take 2 days to decode it. We'll feed the information into the main computer system, and that will take 16 hours of trying to analyze the data, because there's about a bank of about 3 million PCRs that it has to decipher through to try and map it all out. Right, but by the end of the following week, our students will have that for a presentation. And this is an undergrad project here. Actually, there's a combination of 3 undergrads doing different aspects of it. One looking at gases, one looking at organic matter, and the other looking at the microbes and the DNA. But if you look down here, where we use the calcium ammonium nitrate plus sulfur, right, CAN plus S, we applied it at 30 kilos of nitrogen per hectare, which is what we thought would have been the norm early on. But look at well number 7, where that arrow is pointing to. That sulfur in there, compared to well number 8, that sulfur has a massive impact on something. But I don't have that result for another 2 weeks. And hopefully we can pinpoint exactly what that was at that time. Then that was only after 4 weeks. Like we took samples, applied the fertilizer, went back 4 weeks later, took the second set of samples. Right. In that 4-week impact, the impact on soil organic matter, this is the total, not just the microbes. It looks like it was a big hit on the microbes, but just the soil organic matter reduced by 2% in 4 weeks. It's massive, right? And it's not a trial that you would normally do. Normally you try to start off with the chemical and try and build up the organic, which takes a long time. We just looked at the reverse of that to see the impact, and it's more than significant, right? Well, we applied 30 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. This is the recommendation from Teagasc only last week. Imagine the burnout you're going to get with that application. And they're saying that's one application, all at the same time. Right, if you're cutting your silage in 50 days' time, 2 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. And that's straight chemical nitrogen, that's not the compound. If you take that the can is about, we could call it 25%, right, that would be 400 kilos of that can product per hectare. That'd be like snow. Right, what's the impact of all that? These are our neighbours that we look at across the valley. Now the picture is slightly out of focus because I was trying to zoom in a little bit and I was just trying to do the phone camera. So excuse the quality, but there he goes. Anyone see anything wrong with that picture? You don't have to play the whole lot, is it? Well, he's inverting the soil. What would you normally see following a plough? Where are the birds? Why are they not there? Because there's absolutely nothing for them to eat. Nothing. I'm telling you a small lie. 2 seagulls did come along and they landed down somewhere around that point there. And after 2 minutes or so looking at one another, they just flew off again. Right. But that's the impact. Right? Not sure what that was. Anyway, there he is, happy out. Right. No slurry, all chemicals. I've never seen them spread slurry on that. Okay, that's all chemicals. So he loves this as well. He worked 8 times with his crop sprayer on that cereal crop.
What crop?
He goes 8 applications, 8 spray applications. Yeah. Wheat. Right. And this is what we all focus on, the impact of these chemicals on pollinators. And that's what gets all the attention. He'll use fungicides, insecticides, pesticides, yeah, and herbicides. Exactly. That's the exact point. Why is it not legal? Yeah. But this is what we put all our focus on. This is where all the attention goes, on this crop sprayer. If you want to hide something, where's the best place to hide it? In plain sight. Here's the real culprit. This is the one that's really doing massive damage. All the chemical fertilizers that protected urea, that's wiping out everything that you don't see in the soil, but all of the life in the soil that's feeding the plant. So we killed it off, and now we're sterilizing it to make sure that if it does come back, it's a very slow comeback. So somebody in this system deciding, okay, I'm going to stop using all these and I'm going to go organic. How many years is it going to take that size to come back into production? You have to grow all that microbial population again, from pretty much from zero. Right? And this is why, and this is where we are. You know, so looking at our pollinators, we need to pay attention not just to what's happening on the surface. We need to look at the bigger picture. And going at that will feed in to better food production, not a reduction in food production. We get better volumes, but we'll do it cleaner. And if we do it cleaner, we get more nutritious food, we get better food nutrient density. Okay. Several of the speakers earlier mentioned education. This is so important. We can go so far at the university, right, and we send them out with the right message, but the problem is they're not the managers. They go back and they're still working at home, but they have no control on the system. And the person who does have control of the system, unfortunately, will just look at advertisements for fertilizer on the common turn, and they'll follow the pack, and they're not willing to change. But I think it's slowly starting to impact. But we need to push that and broaden it and put it in your face a lot more. Right? So we need to go right back to primary level. Not quite back to this level, but why not? That's on the other hand. And we focus on chemical soil analysis. We need to look at the life in the soil. And that's what we need to promote and get right. And going a little bit further than that, here reminded me of an analysis that we've totally forgotten. He always sticks his fingers on the side and hesitates. Right. So we can even learn from our young scientists. We'll never know it all. Right. So you've listened to me for long enough. I'll try playing this and we'll see. The other sound came out quite good. Maybe this one. I'll just play this, and hopefully if you can hear this, it sounds much better than listening to me, believe me. Just casual. We need to wake up tomorrow, Tom. But we need to look after our soils, make sure that they have food to eat in the morning. Okay, thank you very much.